One, two, three.
Perfect.
I
Yeah.
think. Yes. Well, hello and good evening, Dimitris. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's a bit late during the day, so it's a bit tired. But I'm always very happy to to be here and to chat about regenerative economy topics that we are very much interested in.
Yeah, and tonight we wanna like bring you all in closer into our current research focus. And this is like algae to hydrogen and hydrogen to desert greening and how this all relates and correlates. And perhaps we will do that by using one of the recent papers we've published, or actually it's in publishing at the moment, that is focusing on Greece. So like, although we didn't mention hydrogen in that paper, right? It was just a recommendation, right? We focused more on
Yes,
soil amendments.
it was basically soil amendments, but it's basically biomass, so it can be used also for conversion into biohydrogen, which is also one of our scope of focus and a very interesting topic in the discussion about decarbonization.
Yeah, especially like just a few minutes ago, I was scrolling through my LinkedIn feed and I saw like a post on how different energy sources are contributing to decarbonization, and the whole global focus on this electric vehicles and basically like mass electrification of our transportation system is not like it's not going anywhere. It's not going to bring us anywhere because it is again fueling a different type of destruction. And this way the green hydrogen comes into play, like as something that can really move the big vehicles, like like mining vehicles and buses and trucks and like some heavy cargo ships and stuff like that. And planes, of course, like planes are there already was a plane that flew on hydrogen, so this is big, right?
Yes, I mean, I agree with that 100%. And we also have to bear in mind that it's still like no matter the hype that each new technology is getting, electric vehicles still are not something that is fully profitable on its own without the governmental interventions. And we have seen that already with, for example, the subsidiary of Tesla, Lightyear, which is facing severe economic strain. Most of the hype that they're getting is now actually being revealed now that we're facing the economic crisis, like the big inflation and all. And so now it's the time to actually rethink. And in my modest view, I think it's hydrogen is going to play a much bigger role than what we think in the decarbonization of transportation. And it's time to put this in the agenda, especially considering that also the global south is going to play a huge role in the economic development over the next couple of decades, and they need affordable means of transportation. And solely the smart mobility systems, they are not going to work in such a huge piece of land that it's basically most of the countries of the global south, considering countries such as India, such as China, such as Brazil, and the likes.
Yeah, and then like, and also when you talk about like co-financing of fuels, like fossil fuels are getting like trillions of dollars from all the governments in the world. Like their financing is also not like this, for me, like in my perspective, this is the first thing that we should cut. Like all governments should just immediately stop subsidizing fossil fuels. Like it's like you're pulling the trigger in your own head. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But I don't understand. Like I'm not into policy. I'm mostly like climate scientist. You're the one into policy.
Yeah.
So like if you want, you like, this is I would like to know. This is what I would like to know. Let's dig into this. What do you see, for example, when you look at the policy currently on hydrogen? In let's just focus on Europe. The current policy on hydrogen in Europe, and the current policy, or why it, are we still financing the fossil fuels? Why?
I mean, with regards, with regards to, let's say, the developing world or the global south, like many countries, I mean, outside of Europe, that many of them are oil or gas producing countries. It's in their interest to subsidize, let's say, fossil fuels, and also subsidize their consumption, but in general also subsidize the companies that are operating there, because it's going to give them, at the end of the day, increasing number of exports, and that is going to lead to, a better, let's say, economy on the short term. And I mean, when you're a politician, you usually are more concerned about the short term than the long term goal. uh, if you consider, let's say, the European Union, which is not so much an exporting country on energy, I would rather say that there are other causes, for example, lobbying, and also that most of the multinational companies, they still have a strong grip on that regard, both in Brussels, within the European Union, and also within the separate within separate countries as well. But yeah, in most of the other countries, for example, if you consider Russia, if you consider Iran, and most of these countries, the subsidization merely has to do with, of course, the fact that they're contributing to the economy of the country in a huge part. Um, when it comes to that, I would say that hydrogen has a better chance of actually um, replacing both gas and oil in becoming, let's say, the backbone of an economy in these countries, for a number of reasons, for storage reasons, for weather conditions, and for other reasons. It can become a much better pillar of the economy for these countries than, let's say, if you electrify everything.
Yeah, and if you think about it, can we now more easily retrofit, let's say like that, retrofit the whole storage system and transportation system of oil and gas to hydrogen? Is it easier because the tanks could be maybe refurbished or reused?
Yeah, in terms of, let's say, pipeline infrastructure, I think it's just, let's say, the compressor stations, they need to be, let's say, refurbished, and then we need to make some other minor adjustments. I think it's not so costly with regards to that. When it comes to vehicles, it's also, like, at the first glance, of course, it's not costly, but of course we have to see that, we have to do our research in the long term. If we operate these vehicles on a regular basis, what are the exact effects? But of course, if you just see this as merely a retrofitting process, is not something expensive. And I think most of this, also if you consider boilers, other infrastructure that operate with gas, for example, or with oil, it's not something that is very difficult to, it's not something that is very costly, comparing to, let's say, buying heat pumps for everything, which at this point is extremely expensive. Buying like a Tesla car for every municipality out there, everything is very expensive with that regard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then just thinking of all the, in my head is only thinking of all the batteries and all the lithium you would need and all the lithium mining and destruction of the ecosystems that it will pull with itself. Um, but this is very interesting because in my head, there is this big, like when you don't know about hydrogen, and I am one of the people that didn't know about hydrogen just a year ago. Like you brought me into this subject. Um, I would say like I was okay, yes, there is this hydrogen alternative fuel which is very easily flammable or it explodes. This is like this was somewhere in the back of my head. But now that that I'm into the subject and researching alongside you and just reading about it, it natural gas is much more explosive than hydrogen and much more flammable, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not specifically that it's more inflammable in every sense, but it's basically what you say, that like every fuel can become inflammable. Every fuel can become dangerous if you do not know how to operate it. And uh, hydrogen, we have a lot of knowledge about, and because it's it's like like a component also fertilizers. It's a component we have been using for many operations, also on the heavy industry as well, on the chemicals industry. It's something that we have been working with. We know it, and I think that there are the guidelines, there are the mechanisms on how to optimally operate it. So I don't think it is as dangerous as it sounds, of course, but at the same time, it shows that there is an extreme need of capacity building to the local communities, to every single profession that is going to operate it, which is
Yeah.
essentially every profession out there, from car workshops to even people that fix boilers and everything. So there is a big need towards training, retraining, and capacity building.
Yeah, so if you're by any chance a mechanic that is watching this, car mechanic, and wants to test a little bit hydrogen retrofitting with us, you can write us, or just like contact Dimitris. He's very open on LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah, I'm very responsive, especially with people that want to experiment with hydrogen.
Yeah, yeah. So we need just five different engines to test
Yeah.
for now. Yeah, perfect. And if we're thinking now in this, like all the stakeholders, and just just for me, just knowing that the hydrogen ecosystem and like creating this green hydrogen is something that is rebuilding the ecosystem instead of destroying it. This is like the big thing why my mind entirely shifted to hydrogen versus the electric vehicles and the Tesla cars and similar, which wasn't until that point, was the preservation of our ecosystems. And because our biodiversity is already destroyed, like we don't have any insects anymore, and let's not talk about all the other animals that we are just killing every day. So for me, just that one thing, like preserving biodiversity and preserving ecosystems, was what played a crucial role as something like a light switch. Like, okay, we have to find a way to work together.
Yeah.
And but really, and now knowing that like we can create hydrogen while using, let's say, algae, that is in one, and this is like a short description of our recent paper, is that we are basically using algae to harvest agricultural nutrient runoff in freshwater rivers before it reaches the sea, so it doesn't destroy the marine ecosystem and create dead zones and algae blooms there. Like we use the algae in freshwaters to remove that, and then use those algae to create further hydrogen. And then what is like the byproduct, this waste we used for soil amendments and further for desert greening, and it can be used in like different types of amenities to like increase the agricultural production because it's nutrient dense. So this for me, like just that one thing that not only that doesn't cause any destruction, but it's actually causing like regeneration and reblossoming. That this is like something like supreme.
Yes, and it's basically something that is already in research on a larger scale. With specifically, there are scientists that are working on the Atlantic with sargassum blooms, which are much larger blooms, of course, and they're considering hydrogen as already as a very strong alternative, as a very strong case to use all this sargassum for conversion and also to biostimulants. They are working on a similar case, essentially. What we are researching is this, but on smaller scale, to basically serve small communities. For example, Greece is also a community which has a much smaller demand, for example, on hydrogen or on fertilizers than, let's say, countries that are close to the ocean, such as the USA or Brazil, that are working on solutions with sargassum. We are
Mm.
working more on smaller scale solutions, and we really believe seeing also larger players working on such blooms. We are thinking that working on this on smaller ones, it's going to create, let's say, these local regenerative economy communities that we are thinking about and that we are advocating in favor of. And seeing the results so far of our research, I think this is largely promising. And also seeing the results of similar researches in other countries, I think there is a huge potential for this. I think it's a very promising solution.
Yeah, and especially also now, like just like when you're in the topic, you hear more and more about, like, I always think that like it's redundant when you start reading about, I don't know, Tchaikovsky. You hear Tchaikovsky all the time, but it's the same
Yeah.
with algae and hydrogen, and I just think it's and now everywhere. Now I see, like, I walk into the supermarket and I see like this food supplements from algae here and there harvested, and it's like, of course, because of this algae and quite a few species that we actually narrowed down with Dr. Costas were the ones that could be used as food supplements, as well as lamina. Yeah, I don't, I'm not like the expert on that, but yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I think basically our colleague on that research, Dr. Kostas Koukaras, is the main expert on marine biology, and he is more knowledgeable on the microalgae species part. But definitely, depending on their nutrient content or lipid content, they can be used for biofuels or specifically food supplements. And
Mm.
there are different kinds of supplements, and also they can be used for hydrogen depending on their content. And that is something that our research highlights, and also our expertise, our combined expertise, can provide recommendations if there is anyone that is interested. So we see this as a huge chance to, let's say, try to reverse some of the effects of climate change. And it also puts some communities that are directly, if affected, um, it makes them, let's say, more powerful. It puts these tools on their hands to try to do this, whereas so far they had none. They had no tools to fight
Mm.
this issue. And I'm talking specifically about small island states that are the ones that are directly affected from sea level rise. And for example, solutions such as wind parks or solar panels, they are not very much applicable due to their small size, due to their weather conditions in some cases. And so this presents them with an opportunity to actually create new business ecosystems, while at the same time really fighting the effects of climate change.
Yeah, and on one hand, I think like this is really the small island states like bring more into the focus the whole circularity, because they're there, they're depending on themselves, like what to do with the waste, what do you do with your wastewater, what, like everything. Um, it's a perfect place to create a good testing grounds for anything, that for any circular system, for any type of implementation of a real circularity. And for my from my experience, always El Hierro in Spain comes to mind, because they really made the whole island like super green, and it's really really super blue because it's like a blue economy testing ground, but it's like super blue. And really, like with the fisheries, what they achieved with their energy savings and everything. And it's the right, this is the right approach, like finding such little island states to try to test also the hydrogen application, and why not, because it will be easy, and it's important for their waste streams as well, right?
Yes, exactly. And if we take this even a little bit further in terms of distance, I mean, from Europe, if we go, for example, to the Pacific Islands, there have been a lot of people that we have been in contact with, both in governmental bodies and in civil society, that they
Right.
have said we do have issues with waste, there is no place to put them. We need to be able to valorize them in some sense, and this is a perfect opportunity for that as well. It's something like it seems like a silver bullet. Of course, there are issues that are going to arise up to the point that they're going to be streamlined, but that's why we are here with the multidisciplinary and systems thinking to try to guide these communities, and also in general anyone that is interested in implementing these solutions and really putting them in the socio-technical regime, let's say.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I agree. I mean, of course, I agree, but this is why we
it's
work together.
it's basically the results of our research, so I think
Yes,
it's yeah, it's something that we all
it was
agreed
a great
upon.
debate.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, no, sure. I'm just trying to see because we're trying to keep our podcast like easily digestible and short and in
Yeah.
videos, especially for YouTube because we're new and we want to bring the real science to you. So I think it was a really good short dive into this algae to hydrogen to desert graining and all the different variations in between. And maybe we just like figure out for the next of our podcasts like a very narrow subject, and so maybe in these 20 minutes we can actually like go much deeper in. And maybe the next podcast can be on actually on the soils of Greece. Because we found
Yeah.
like a glitch in the matrix there. There are more soils than there is land.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea
Yeah,
to
yeah,
elaborate more
yeah,
on some things that need a little bit of improvement on
yeah,
the on the mapping of the
yeah,
soils, and
yeah.
also on our suggestions on your mainly, as when you are more of like the soil expert, but I can also add my thoughts, and yeah, I think it would be really good to do that.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Dimitris, and thank you guys for listening to us. If you made it this far, that means you're really interested into algae and hydrogen and desert greening, and you should definitely hit us up on LinkedIn and then here on YouTube. We are very responsive and very eager to learn what you think. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. We also have we also learn a lot about, from other people. So I think it's great to share a little bit of our thoughts. So yeah, hit us up and let's
Exactly.
co-create. Why not co-create as well? So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, ciao.
Ciao.